850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Coming up tonight, the fallout between the presidents, Zelenskyy and Trump, took more twists and turns today than a roller coaster. We'll debate the latest on that. And the farmers rode back into town today, but not en masse on tractors, after those things were pretty much banned. So hold on then, how come things like those massive pink boats are allowed to block roads then for other protests? Double standards or not? And as the cost of crime soars, I'm asking, should top civil servants be sacked? And amendments to the Employers' Rights Bill today. Some say they want it to go even further. Others saying it does not go far enough. What say? And my panel tonight, I've got Susan Hall, the Conservative member of the London Assembly, and Samuel Sweet, the political commentator. Before we get stuck in, though, let's cross live and give you your 6 o'clock news headlines.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story tonight at 6. Volodymyr Zelenskyy says Ukraine is now ready to negotiate for peace. That's if Russia agrees to a truce on missiles, bombs and attacks on civilian infrastructure. In a social media post earlier, the Ukrainian president said nobody wants peace more than Ukrainians, and he's now ready to work under Donald Trump's leadership to reach a lasting deal. It follows a row between the two leaders over US military aid, which President Trump has put on hold. Zelensky's called their recent meeting in Washington regrettable, but says it's now time to make things right. He's also reaffirmed Ukraine's commitment to signing a minerals and security deal with the United States. Meanwhile, Vance is facing backlash after calling Britain's military contributions deeply disrespectful, amid a growing row between the UK and US over Ukraine aid. The Vice President appeared to dismiss Sir Keir Starmer's offer to send UK troops to help keep the peace. British politicians are now demanding an apology, with the Defence Secretary calling Vance's comments misjudged.
If you want real security guarantees, if you want to actually ensure that Vladimir Putin does not invade Ukraine again, the very best security guarantee is to give Americans economic upside in the future of Ukraine. That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years.
Meanwhile, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has hit back at those comments from the US Vice President, saying he's wrong about Britain's military role.
Vance is wrong. Wrong. For 20 years in Afghanistan, pro rata, our size against America's, we spent the same amount of money, we put the same number of men and women in, and we suffered the same losses. We stood by America all through those 20 years, putting in exactly the same contribution. And all right, they may be 6 times bigger, but we did our bit. So on this one, JD is wrong.
The US Vice President, though, has defended his comments, insisting he never mentioned the UK or France, and has praised both countries for fighting bravely alongside the US. In other news tonight, the trial of triple killer Carl Clifford has heard he raped his ex-girlfriend in what was described as a violent sexual act of spite before murdering her and her family with a crossbow and a knife. The 26-year-old admitted killing Louise Hunt, her mother Carol and sister Hannah at their home in July, but denies rape. Prosecutors say he carefully planned the attacks after Miss Hunt ended their relationship, and he went on to buy weapons and deceived his way into the home. Jurors were told Louise described the relationship as sucking the life out of her before breaking up with him weeks before the attack. The trial continues. And the King has made a rare visit to a Royal Navy warship at sea, meeting sailors on HMS Prince of Wales before its biggest mission yet. His Majesty flew by helicopter to the aircraft carrier in the English Channel, thanking the crew for their extraordinarily valuable service. The £3 billion ship will soon set sail for Japan, leading the UK's strike group in a mission to boost defence partnerships. And it's the first time in nearly 40 years a reigning monarch's boarded a Royal Navy ship while at sea.
I can only say that I take immense pride in you, the men and women who bring this vessel to life with such indomitable spirit, for your vital service on behalf of us all.
Those are the latest headlines for now. A full roundup from me in around an hour's time. Now, though, it's over to Michelle.
Thank you very much for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co. and we're with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got a new face on the panel, Susan Hall, the Conservative member of the London Assembly. Alongside her, returning face, Samuel Sweet, the political commentator. Good evening to both of you. You're very welcome tonight.
Thank you.
We do love a new face, so welcome. You've done GB News before, but just not Dewbs & Co, I think. Is that right?
That's right, that's right.
Well, there you go. You can tell me what you think of Susan at the end. I'm sure you won't be backwards in coming forwards. If I know some of you lot at home, and you know the drill, don't you? It is about you guys at home as well. What is on your mind tonight? We have a lot to discuss, so strap yourselves in and join the conversation all the usual ways. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to the website, gbnews.com/yoursay, or of course you can tweet or X me. Now, the situation when it comes to the war in Ukraine, it really does move at a fast pace. Of course, we're all familiar with what happened on Friday, then subsequently across the weekend. As we revealed to you last night as well on this programme, Donald Trump, he was quite angry. He was on his Truth Social messaging out saying that Zelenskyy essentially wasn't taking things seriously and the US were not prepared to put up with it for much longer. Well, what happened then? We all woke up today, didn't we, to the news that Donald Trump, he's essentially stopped US military aid going over to America. Zelenskyy, he took to Twitter. It's so odd, isn't it, in this modern day and age, all of this goes on, doesn't it, on social media. But Zelenskyy put a really long tweet up off the back of that. It was very long, and I'm playing it for you on the screen. But essentially, Susan, he was reiterating Ukraine's commitment to peace. He was saying that he doesn't want an endless war and that he's ready, and he and his team stand ready to work under President Trump, I quote, strong leadership to get a peace deal that lasts. It went on and on, basically thanking him very much, saying that he regrets the way that the conversation unfolded on Friday and that he's ready to sign the deal when it comes to the minerals and rare earth and so on. What do you think to all of this, Susan?
Well, it's a very volatile situation, and you were quite right at the start of the show. You said it's been like a roller coaster. Things keep changing. I think the less said by many commentators, in some ways, the best. And let's see where this goes, because we have got to support, and we should want to support Zelenskyy, and of course, the Ukraine in general, but equally, everybody should want some form of a peace deal. And if nothing else, and many things have been done that nobody approves of, if nothing else, it looks like they might go to the table, and in which case we're more likely to get a settlement or at least a truce for a while to see what can be done. And I think that has to be a good thing.
Samuel?
Well, I mean, you know, where can you even really begin? As you say, there's been more twists and turns today than any of us can really keep up with. I've had to junk my notes that I've made before coming on about 3 times. What is the greatest tragedy for me here, though, is the length of time it's taken to get to this point, when there's been an active and live movement around the world of people who are calling for a cessation of these hostilities. They've been calling for a deal, a negotiation, and what it looks like has happened now is hundreds of thousands of deaths later and millions displaced in Ukraine. Is that with the Zelensky's hand looks like it's been significantly weakened by Donald Trump's actions.
Well, it was ever this, though, wasn't it? I mean, you know, I've got to point out the obvious. I mean, I almost feel like I don't want to point out the obvious, but, you know, Zelenskyy was never going to be able to do this, never going to win this war, whatever winning that war looked like, and people disagree and dispute on that. But you're never going to do it without the support and money and funding and aid and all the rest of it of the US. And to think for anyone to think that he could have is a bit deluded, isn't it?
Well, perhaps, but I mean, you've also...
But when you say perhaps, what do you see another route where if the US were not providing, whether it was arms, whether it was cash, whether it was whatever, do you see a route where Zelenskyy could have won this war without that?
I mean, ideally, we wouldn't have been in this situation in the first place.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, if you look at the sort of situation that led to the conflict in Ukraine and Russia's invasion, which obviously I fully condemn, but what you have to look at for Putin's perspective is NATO incursions getting closer and closer to the Russian border, which is actually what he would use as an excuse to have started his invasion.
Well, it's always been a red line for him, hasn't it? He's always been very clear. I mean, this is not something to be confused, because he's always been resolute on this. He did not want that NATO border to expand and expand and expand, and it did keep doing so. And of course, conversations about whether or not Ukraine should be in NATO, we were all very well versed in those conversations, but this shouldn't have been a surprise to anybody then.
Well, perhaps not. No, perhaps not. But this could have been avoided. It looks like it's going to end. Well, we hope that the war will end very soon, and it looks like that will happen around a table, because no war ever ends with just the last man standing. You know, we should have been at this point years ago. And as I said, millions displaced and thousands dead later. That's a real tragedy.
Shall I tell you something that makes me a little bit uncomfortable, Susan? I've followed a lot of commentary about this situation in recent days, weeks, hours, as almost all of us have. The word conscription seems to be getting bandied around a lot now in different debates, as though it's become somehow normalised that there is, or there may be this point down the line where British individuals could perhaps be conscripted to go and fight this war. And I find it so strange that people are having this debate about that as though it's kind of inevitable.
I know, and well, it's terrifying. It's particularly terrifying and very selfishly when you've got a son and grandsons, and you think, well, and granddaughters actually, and you think, this isn't where we want it to go. I think all of us thought up until Russia went into Ukraine that any other war would be more a nuclear war or something like that. I don't think we ever thought we'd have a land war again. Certainly, I think we've been lulled into that, which is why, of course, European countries have not put enough money into defence. And defence secretaries for many years have said we have got to put more investment into defence.
I'm going to show you a clip in a second about JD Vance, because he's found himself in hot water as well. But I just find this whole kind of notion about conscription, and just if you browse across the commentary within the media landscape, you'll see what I mean. It's so commonplace now that these conversations are taking place. I can't help but ponder on the fact as well that all these people, if you ever were to move over to a position of conscription, the people that you'd be trying to conscript are those very same people that Keir Starmer has spent goodness knows how long essentially calling far-right wrong-uns. But yet, apparently, people would be expecting those kind of people to potentially go and fight for their country. I mean, really? Anyway, look, JD Vance, he's found himself in hot water. Take a listen to what he said on an interview on Fox News.
If you want real security guarantees, if you want to actually ensure that Vladimir Putin does not invade Ukraine again, the very best security guarantee is to give Americans economic upside in the future of Ukraine. That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years.
I mean, everyone seems to be offended by everything these days, but notwithstanding that, loads of people are offended that they're saying that he was talking about the UK there and that it is insulting to us. What do you think?
Well, he has said he wasn't. And I think we can't keep picking on very little bits and pieces. This is such a big picture, and we've got to be so careful what he's said, because we don't want to make things worse. I think, to be honest, when I heard that they wanted to do this deal, I thought the good thing about that is that there'll be many Americans on Ukraine's soil, which, you know, if Russia then starts to think about coming across the border again, if they come to a settlement, then America would automatically get involved because they would have so much business in the country, and therefore that is a way of putting Americans or American interests into that country.
Samuel?
Well, I mean, like, firstly, I mean, I'm not really asked what JD Vance has to say on the matter. I'm not offended by his comments. But I think there's too much at stake to fixate on you know, what the Vice President is saying. There's too much at stake. There's too many lives on the line. We've come, as I said earlier, we're years down the line, and we're hopefully coming to a position where the war will end. Diplomacy has failed, there's no doubt about that. And I think it's the responsibility of all governments, the US, ours, and all other partners across Europe to come together and actually ensure that there is an agreement in place and no more people are going to be sent to war. And just to come in on conscription there, I mean, like across Ukraine, Russia, there's been people murmuring about it in this country. Again, sending working class people to die for the failure of diplomacy. I thought we were long past those days, but once again, the military-industrial complex is willing to prove all of us wrong.
What do you think? I mean, have you got loved ones of kind of fighting age? Would you be up for it? A lady, I'll try and find the email, actually. You got in touch with me. You asked me last night, we were talking about this, and you said that you're absolutely terrified at the moment because you told me that your son, that your nephew and one of their friends is in the military, and you thought you'd never see the day, and you hope you'd never see the day when they ever had to do ground conflict like this. You told me that as a human level, I remember your words, on a human level, you obviously understood it was the right thing to do if you're in the military, that's what you do. You essentially potentially go to war, but you said on a mum, family, loved ones level, you're absolutely terrified about it. Get in touch and tell me your thoughts on that. Bill says, JD Vance must think us British folk are thick. If he doesn't think that we know he was referring to the UK and to France in his comments. And Brian says that JD Vance needs to be very careful of his rambling words. You're saying that you found his words insulting. Absolutely insulting, and that you want JD Vance to be the person that has to learn some diplomacy. Keep your thoughts on that one. Coming in after the break, I want to talk to you about farmers. They're out again protesting. Will it make any difference? But crucially, I want to ask, do you think it's right that en masse tractors should be banned when it comes to these protests or not?
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
I ended up being hospitalised, and I was diagnosed with it within the first few days of being in hospital. I was in hospital for 2 months, and I came out about 13 months ago, something like that. And I realised that there are people that aren't as lucky as me that don't have that platform to be able to talk about it, bring it out in the public, and deal with the stigma, because there is still a stigma.
A lot of people don't really know what bipolar is. So in you, Heston, how did it manifest itself?
It's funny because before the diagnosis, I mean, everything, many things, from thinking the TV was talking to me to hallucinating stuff. The downside is suicidal thoughts, which seemed normal at the time. The upside is the thing, there's grandiosity, somewhere between Superman and Jesus Christ. Wow. Save the world, love everybody, everything is fantastic. And then it comes crashing down. It's a bit like a toddler, you know, an overexcited child. And when a kid gets overexcited, and then something happens and then they start crying.
Wow. So massive highs, big lows.
Yeah, but I thought everything was normal. It's only now that I've come out the other side, so to speak, that I look back and can see some of the character traits. I mean, my patience levels were almost non-existent before. I'm a lot more patient. I'm talking much slower. I was talking very quickly.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 here on Dewbs & Co alongside me Susan Hall and Samuel Sweek remain now. Of course, we talk about the plight of the farmers, don't we, very often on this channel. Today has been no different because they've descended again en masse on the capital of the UK here in London, demanding, of course, a reversal to the inheritance tax. Some would call it, I mean, the words that people use, Susan, and of course a lot of these farmers who we speak to, they're furious that this was ever even presented as a thing when they'd previously been told it was not going to be. Anyway, they're not allowed to arrive en masse on tractors.
I know.
What do you think is this? Because some people are saying that there's a bit of double standard at play. Do you agree with that or not?
Well, there is double standards. We had to put up with this wretched pink boat in the middle of Oxford Circus. I think it was there for 10 days or something, and everything came to a grinding halt, and nobody was allowed to say anything. That Just Stop Oil carried on. And then I did some television for some people around the Just Stop Oil demonstrations, and they were dancing in the street and stopping people going past, gluing themselves to the floor and everything, and that's all right. The farmers will never cause trouble. There will not be problems when the farmers are there. But they're the ones that have stopped bringing their tractors in to London. I hope the government actually go back on this because they've let the farmers down very, very badly. And I'm hoping it's adjusted in the spring statement. It's absolutely appalling.
Do you have any optimism that it will be reversed or not?
I have no optimism with this wretched government whatsoever. Anything they say they'll do, they're going back on. They seem to promise the farmers that all would be well if they got in. And of course, then they did this, which came out of the blue. People don't understand. The trouble is, socialists think that all farmers are multi-millionaires and therefore, you know, they can easily afford to pay all this inheritance tax. And that is very far from the truth.
Samuel?
Where to begin? I think where I will start is just to correct Susan there, is that the people from Just Stop Oil, I mean, they're the founder of Just Stop Oil, Roger Hallam, for example, is now spending 5 years in prison. So it's not true to say that nothing happened to these people. They weren't allowed to carry. Many arrests were made. Many people are currently going through the legal system who took part in Just Stop Oil protests. In regard to the tractors, I mean, by nature, I mean, protest is disruptive.
Roger Hallam, by the way, just to come in, he was not imprisoned for antics like pink boats, was he? It was about plotting to bring the motorway service, well, not the services, but the whole infrastructure of the motorways to a standstill in this country. Sure.
The point I'm illustrating is that Just Stop Oil there is legal processes against people, not just Roger Hallam, I don't know everyone's name, but there are loads who are currently going through the system. So
Good.
Right. But protest by nature is disruptive. But with that said, it must be protected. I haven't got a problem with the farmers driving their tractors through Whitehall. If that's how they want to illustrate their point, then good for them. That's what we need to protect. But what we do need to be looking at, if we're on the topic of policing and the way the government looks at protest, from last week, the organisers of, say, Palestine Solidarity Campaign and Stop the War marches have received letters to be called in for police questioning. And that includes an 87-year-old Holocaust survivor who is, you know... But
what are they getting questioned about?
About you know, alleged breaches of terms that were put there by the police.
But hang on, be specific, and maybe I'm wrong in my recall here, but isn't it about whether or not they were passing synagogues?
No.
Is that not what they're being questioned about?
The route of the march was diverted away from that. But what they have been questioned about is allegedly leaving a zone which was not in the direction that the synagogue that they had already not gone past was in.
Right.
What they have been essentially bringing in for questioning, and that includes Jeremy Corbyn, that includes John McDonnell and others, is allegedly breaching the peace and terms that were put to them by the police, despite there being much documented evidence on the day that the police fully facilitated the part of the march which has now come into question.
Do you think in your mind there should be a cut-off point? So if you're saying, like, you think that protest should be permitted and all the rest of it, obviously what we're talking about there, the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, that's been going on weekend after weekend after weekend after weekend. And anyone that's got, for example, a small business in London, they have, I mean, I've spoken to quite a lot of people who really feel that their trade has been impacted because a lot of people potentially stay away from central London when they know that those protests are taking place. You've got a lot of disruption. So do you think that people should be able to protest for just forever, basically, if that's what they want to do?
Well, I think it's legitimate to say that people can protest for as long as there's a genocide going on in Palestine. I think that remains legitimate. We don't put limits, say, on how much free speech someone can have, how much freedom of expression someone can have, and the right to protest.
But you see, this is where the right. I mean, you call it a genocide, and I know that many people will be watching this. I can almost feel my inbox lighting up with you guys getting in touch at that description. Where are you on this in terms of the marches? I mean,
in terms of, I've only ever gone on one, so I'm a really bad person
and what
to
was
ask.
That?
And that was just after October 7th, and it was a peace march. With the Jewish people I know, that we were just silently walking for peace, and obviously wanting those hostages back. So I am not a frequenter of demonstrations, but I do accept people have got the right to demonstrate. I think those people that are being questioned is because they went through a police line, and there's a video going around showing it.
They were facilitated through the police line and told they were allowed to pass evidence of this.
In any event, I mean, Michelle's completely right. There are people that won't go into London now because of these wretched marches. They just take over London, and the farmers are not constantly taking over London. And it's about something that's happening here and that the government have done to them.
Yeah, but hold on, because what you're basically saying is that, so would you support, for example, let's just pick the farmers. So would you support the farmers protesting every single Saturday for years on end because you agree with that cause?
No, I would hope that they'd find different... And they're going in different places, and so they're not doing the same thing.
Palestine marches have different routes every time.
Nevertheless, they're in London, and I know so many Jewish people, and I know so many people, Jewish people, that will not go into London because they find them frightening because of all the anti-Semitic.
No,
I know that
Stephen
as well.
Kappas, who's a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah, I'm talking about people I know that do not want to go into London because of the anti-Semitic chants that are constantly going on. No, you can shake your head. I'm just telling you.
I'm shaking my head. First, let me just say, as a Jew myself, those marches are incredibly welcoming, they're incredibly supportive, and there is a plethora of Jewish people in this country who are standing up against Israel's actions. And I think to label the marches as being anti-Semitic
No, I said, no, if you're going to quote me, get it right. I said chants, anti-Semitic chants.
This is not something I've witnessed.
Is it not? Well, just go on social media, Pat, and you'll see loads of them.
Well, she's talking about from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Is that? I'm guessing that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Do you regard that as anti-Semitic chanting?
No, I do not.
But then do you also concede, though, that whilst you're Jewish and you're happy and you're comfortable there, there'll be other Jewish people that have a completely different opinion and will find them intimidating and threatening?
Well, they ought not to, and I think that there are people who play a...
You say, no, you can't say they're not intimidating.
No,
you can say that you don't find them intimidating. You can't say that other Jewish people wouldn't.
No, I accept that people may do, but my point is that they are not a threat. They're not a threat, and the presenting of that is incredibly disingenuous, I think.
Well, look, you guys can have the final say on this one at home. All I would ask you is, when it comes to protest, if you've got to imagine the cause that is the most passionate that you can agree with and support, that I don't know what issue it might be, but I always think it's interesting to think about protest from the side of the fence that you would agree with the issue on. And where do you think, if ever, there should be a line? Get in touch and tell me your thoughts on that. Coming up, we've got a lot to discuss. The Employment Rights Bill, amendments proposed to that. Some people saying it doesn't go far enough. Other people saying it goes too far. What do you think to all of that? I also want to speak to you as well about crime. I'll see you in 2.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Plenty of warm sunshine across southern parts of the UK this week, but it'll also be fine in Italy. Meanwhile, unsettled in Spain, with increasingly wet and windy weather developing. Those showery outbreaks of rain also pushing into Madeira, but the wettest spot will be eastern parts of Spain, the Balearics, where it will be very windy in addition to the wet weather. Italy, largely dry with sunny spells, likewise for Greece, albeit with a gusty wind. And similar weather is expected to last throughout much of the week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are long delays in West Yorkshire on the M1 southbound tonight. The entry slip road is partly blocked to junction 42, so restrictions coming off the motorway onto the westbound M62 at the Lofthouse interchange, where emergency services are dealing with an ongoing incident. On the M16 Greater Manchester, the motorway is blocked clockwise. Just before junction 17, the Prestwich exit, a lorry's overturned, causing long queues back to Trafford Park, junction 9. And in Nottinghamshire, just southeast of Worksop, a serious collision that continues to be investigated close as the A1 near to Upper Moreton. The Surrey stretch of the M25 down to 2 lanes clockwise. There's been a crash in the roadworks just after the A3 at Wisley. Junction 10 queues back to 9 at Leatherhead. And in West Sussex, about a mile north of Horsham at Kingsfold, the A24 is blocked by a multi-vehicle collision on the Dorking Road. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co with you till 7, alongside in my panel Susan Hall, the Conservative member of the London Assembly, and Samuel Sweek, the political commentator. Just before the break, we were talking about the farmers' protests here in London again today. Lots of you getting in touch on that one. Phil says, Michelle, please can you point out that farmers have been very, very patient up until this point. He worries and wonders whether or not that will always remain the case, though. Let's wait and see what happens there. James says, what are you all talking about, banning tractors, about restricting traffic flow? He says the horrendous 20-mile-an-hour speed limit is already restricting traffic flow, says James. If you're not in London, let me tell you now, I don't know what it's like wherever you are, 20-mile-an-hour limits now, they are all over the place in London. I think it's absolutely absurd. How can you talk about thriving economies and growing economies when you can pretty much walk faster than you can transport yourself and other things around your capital city? It's an absolute jerk, if you ask me. Anyway, Donald says, Michelle, why should anyone pay any inheritance tax whatsoever, not just the farmers? Our families have worked hard their whole life, saved and gone without holidays, etc, etc. We've already paid a fortune in tax. Why should we be taxed again if we want to pass any of it down to our children? I like you, Donald. I agree with that sentiment.
I agree with all their sentiments. I mean, 20-mile-an-hour zones from this wretched Mayor Khan in London is a disgrace. You can't move very far at all. No, I agree with your viewers.
Yeah, I don't mind, by the way, just to be clear on this, I don't mind slow speed limits, of course, outside of schools, during school hours and stuff like that. Of course, like, be sensible, everybody. But having 20 mile an hour right across your capital city at all times of the day and night is pathetic, in my humble opinion. Samuel?
Well, I'd like to see actually a reduction in the cost of using public transport in London. It's the most expensive in Europe, and I think...
What's that got to do with 20-mile-an-hour car speed limit?
Well, I think it would take cars off... Well, I mean, like, I'm saying that, firstly, public transport needs to be invested in because it would take more cars...
An hour.
It would take more cars off the road, and then there's more room for cars who actually maybe aren't going from... are coming into London to actually manoeuvre themselves.
I know, but I'm on about 20-mile-an-hour speed limits.
Yeah. But, I mean...
Do you agree with that?
I'm not really that asked, to be honest, Michelle. I think that...
Don't keep saying that word we're at Tea Time Television. Yeah, but do you drive?
No.
Do you think that if you want economic growth, creating crawling traffic and backlogs in traffic is a productive way to achieve growing and thriving economies?
Like I said, I would like to take cars off the road and for them to invest in public transport for climate reasons.
What if you want to use your car?
Then you can. But, I mean, there are people who are better qualified to talk about the rules of the road than me.
Well, there you go. I'm very well qualified because I'm a driver and I find it absolutely infuriating, 20-mile-an-hour limits. Absolutely pointless. Pointless. Maybe you're at home and you're a driver and you absolutely love those things. I don't know, get in touch and tell me. All views welcome, of course, on GB News. But look, what about the inheritance tax that Donald says, why should anyone pay any inheritance tax? Do you agree with Donald on that?
I'm quite torn on inheritance tax, to be honest. I do understand that there are a lot of loopholes that the government should probably focus on closing as opposed to targeting hard-working farmers. But, I mean, it has been, it's a matter of fact, used by...
No, but the premise of inheritance tax, Donald, the viewer, is talking about just the general premise of inheritance tax. He thinks it's unfair. Do you?
No, well, I think there's nuance. There's nuance to it. And I think that in some occasions, yes, I do agree with inheritance tax if it's being used as a loophole to avoid paying your fair share. But in this case, say with the farmers, no, I don't agree with inheritance tax.
I don't agree with that at all, Michelle. I think it's terrible. We pay our taxes all the way through our lives. If we want to leave something to our children, then I don't think there should be inheritance tax.
Well,
I've said it for years.
There you go. What do you think to it all? Look, I want to talk to you about this employment rights bill that is getting tweaked and prodded and poked and going through the process as we speak. There's some new measures that are being announced today. And I mean, we all know about this, don't we? About this employment rights bill. One of the things that people will get in touch and talk to me about, Susan Hall, is this whole concept of day one rights and extending those. There's been conversations today about people that are on 0-hour contracts and having those people being offered fixed number of hours and so on and so forth. Where are you on this?
Well, I've run a business, which is more than any of the cabinet have, and more than any of their advisors have, by the look of it. I mean, Rachel Reeves kept going on about growth. Quite right, we need growth. What they don't seem to understand is if we don't make it easy for people to build up businesses, to employ people, we are not going to get growth. And this is yet another thing to hammer employers on. I mean, the national insurance increase is going to stop an awful lot of people from being employed. I suspect people will also be laid off. But one of the things in it is the zero-hour contracts. They're saying to stop that. There are so many people that like zero-hour contracts. If you're at uni and you want to do some hours when it suits you and not when you've got lessons, some people with children, they can sometimes work and sometimes not. It suits them. My shop, there was a shop 2 doors down that used to put on lots of dining events, and they used to then employ loads of people to go and do the waitressing, etc. But then they'd have to wait for the next dining event. It suited the waitresses or the waiters to actually be on a zero contract because they could say yes or no.
Concede that some employers do treat their staff badly and that they do perhaps, you know, not think about them in terms of zero-hour contracts and all the rest of it. It's all purely about the bottom line of the business.
In some instances, that will be the case, but you can't just do this because it will damage business yet again. This government doesn't understand how business works, and that's why, if we're not careful, we'll go into recession. Because if you don't look after businesses, it's businesses that employ people, and if you want to get growth, you've got to look after businesses.
Samuel?
Well, I mean, I take the point that Susan is making, but there is no businesses, there is no productivity, there's no creation without the workforce. And many times zero-hours contracts are used to exploit those workforces. You look at giants like Amazon, giants like Uber, Deliveroo, who record billions in profits. And that's off the back of underpaying their overworked workforce. So we need to clamp down on that. And I think the government is right to do it. That's a move that is very long overdue.
But so what are you saying then? Do you think that zero-hour contracts shouldn't even be a thing?
Yeah, I think that everybody should have a guarantee. They should have a guarantee of how much time and how much income they can make, whether it be just a few hours a week at the very least. I think that that is something that everyone who is working should be entitled to.
So you want to remove the choice from people that are happy to be on zero-hour contracts?
I think the majority of people who are on zero-hour contracts are not happy with that arrangement.
How do you know? Have you spoke to what poll?
Consulted with IWGB, who's the union who supports delivery riders, which I actually used to be one. It's an incredibly difficult, incredibly strenuous level of work, and there are thousands of people in London alone who are unable to pay their bills, they're unable to cover their rent, they're unable to actually do anything other than work.
Are you on a zero-hour contract? Any of you guys that are watching at home, do you sit there and actually, do you want to be on one, or do you actually think that they're exploitative? Where are you on all of this? What about these things like, because obviously zero-hour contracts are just one element, what about some of the other elements like your day one rights and things like that, which this bill is proposing?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think for too long the balance has been in favour of incredibly rich employers in most cases. I take that not every employer is loaded, but I do think that every person, when they do start a new role, should be protected. And I think that they need to improve sick pay. I think there needs to be better protections in work benefits as well.
Susan Hall, you're sighing.
I am sighing because there's this assumption that if you're an employer, you're worth a fortune. Farmers are worth a fortune. It's this socialist attitude to people. No, you may laugh, but what you don't stop to think is people that run small businesses often have to get massive loans in the first place. Their home is on the line to the bank. If they don't take enough money in a week, the money goes to the staff, not to them. Believe me, I have been there. Have you ever run a business?
I've not run a business.
No, well, I have for decades. And let me tell you, it makes me so cross when people assume that people, just because they're running a business, are worth a fortune.
I did say in my points there that I take that not all employers are incredibly wealthy. But I think when you look at people like Amazon, who we talked about before, yes, those workers deserve strong contracts and guarantees when they start their employment.
But there are millions and millions of other businesses, and they will all suffer from this if it goes through. They really will.
Don't they want to look after their workforce? Don't they want their workforce to be happy and well supported?
Yes,
then you've got nothing to worry about. It's rogue employers that should worry.
It's rogue employers, but there are also rogue members of staff sometimes who cost very small businesses a fortune.
How so?
If they are entitled to sick pay from the minute that they start, if you've got a very small workforce, that can have a massive impact on you. There are various other things with this. I mean, the biggest thing for me is the zero-hour contract, because I know so many people that have wanted a zero-hour contract. And it suits everybody.
In this country, particularly when it comes, of course, to the private sector, most people are employed in SMEs, so small and medium enterprises. Yeah. And when you actually look at some of the bodies representing those companies, the FSB, the small business people, as an example, and you look at some of the data surrounding this, there's a reduction in the amount of small businesses that are planning to take on more staff. There's lots of conversation about people just kind of being more hesitant to actually go forward and to hire people. And of course, this comes on a backdrop, because it's not just these new regulations, of course. You've got things like your increased business costs, whether it's minimum wage going up, whether or not, of course, it's your employer's NI. I speak to a lot of small business owners, and I know that you are really worried about the future. So you've got to have a balancing act. Samuel says you can't run a business without people in there. Of course, in this age of artificial intelligence, I wonder what that would look like for the workforce going forward. But of course, you can have all the employees in the land, but if you haven't got the business hiring them, then it all becomes a little bit irrelevant, doesn't it? What are your thoughts on that? You will be divided at home. Get in touch and tell me your thoughts. After the break, I want to talk to you about crime.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Another cold one in the south tonight, so a frost first thing tomorrow and some dense patches of fog. For many, though, it's another day of sparkling spring sunshine. The main difference to that will be across the far northwest, where these weather fronts are bringing rain currently, and they'll linger for much of tomorrow. Quite a wet evening across the northwest. That rain just trickling down towards Glasgow. We'll see some patchy rain across the north of Northern Ireland especially, but further south, most of England and Wales staying dry. A bit more cloud across Northern England, North Wales, but clear skies in the south, allowing that frost. Quite a contrast with temperatures between the far northwest and the far south. A frost here and some quite dense patches of fog. Now, the fog will take a while to clear, so some of the main routes in and around the southeast, the M4, for example, also the A303, could be quite dense, that fog first thing. But generally fine and bright to start the day across much of England and Wales. Quite a cloudy start for most of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it will be a mild start, but still quite windy, gusty winds bringing further outbreaks of rain, particularly to the Highlands and the Western Isles, and they'll linger for a good part of the day. With the winds coming from the south-west, the far northeast of Scotland should have some sunshine, and elsewhere plenty of spring sunshine for England and Wales, probably brightening up a bit through the day across southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. The wet weather, though, will persist in the northwest, feeling quite cool here, I imagine, but temperatures widely are well above average, and in the sunshine, look at that, 14, 15, maybe even 16 degrees Celsius. Another chilly start on Thursday. Again, the possibility of a few fog patches in the south. A bit more cloud for Northern Ireland, maybe the odd shower here, but a drier day in western Scotland. Some rain across the far north. Increasing chance of some showers in the west, but for most, Thursday's another day of sunshine and probably the warmest day of the week. 15, 16, maybe 17 Celsius.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co. alongside me. Susan Hall and Samuel Sweek remain alongside me. Lots of you still getting in touch with me about that JD Vance comment where he was talking about having 20,000 random troops from a random country. Lots of you really are offended by that. Andy says it's absolutely unforgivable. He really does, and he goes on. He says he talks about the ex-military personnel in this country that have PTSD, Gulf syndrome and lots of other disabilities from wars. He says it's just really, he can't forgive JD Vance for saying that. Of course, JD Vance says he wasn't even talking about the UK, but look, keep your thoughts on all of that coming in. Now, a report out today is talking about the cost of crime, £250 billion, in case you're wondering. And it's got some quite radical solutions as to what we're going to do potentially to fix it. It says essentially about firing many of the top civil servants. This report goes on to say that they're not fit for the job. The government should replace in their entirety the most senior executive managers of the Ministry of Justice and the prison services. What do you think to that? A bit extreme or fair?
I haven't read the report, so it would be very unkind, and it's 87 pages, so I didn't have time today. So it will make an interesting read, because I'm passionate about policing, which I'm very worried about in this country. We do have a massive problem. Yeah. Trust and confidence in the police.
But about this principle, at the end of the day, that if you're running, I don't know, the prison service or whatever, or the Ministry of Justice, if your key indicators, because I assume in any job, I mean, I'm saying this out loud, and as I'm saying it, I'm almost like laughing at the ridiculousness of the thoughts, because if this was private sector, you'd have KPIs, you'd have metrics that you're measured against. And for example, I don't know, if you're in charge of prisons or whatever, and the population is swelling all the time, reoffending is going up, and you've got all your metrics not working, then you'd be accountable for that in the private sector. You wouldn't be there for very long. So I'm hoping that there's similar things in the public sector, but I'm not convinced. But anyway.
No, there aren't. And that's the problem. That the thing is, you do need senior people in all these positions.
No, you need effective senior people.
Of course you do. And I quite agree with that. You do need effective senior people. So where would the replacements come from? So, I mean, I need to read the report, because you do need people at the top, but you don't want a whole load of bloated bureaucrats. Absolutely. We need more people on the front line in policing, without doubt. But you can't leave something headless. You have to have people in positions. It should be checked far more than it is. And the appropriateness of certain people being in positions needs to be looked at. And I agree, in the private sector, they'd never keep their jobs.
Well, this report by the Policy Exchange, it doesn't just stop there, by the way. There's a lot more ideas that they come up with. They, of course, want things like extra police numbers. I mean, who doesn't want that in this day and age now? More prison cells. They want a minimum 2-year jail term for what they call hyper-prolific offenders and so on. Samuel, where are you on it?
Well, I mean, it's very interesting for me that this Policy Exchange report, which has been supported by Sajid Javid, who was, of course, the former Home Secretary, as part of an administration of the Conservatives who were in government for 14 years and who themselves oversaw cuts to frontline policing in the tens of thousands. Yeah. Of course, there's going to be crime that's going to be on the rise in people's communities if there's less of a deterrent, if there's less recourse to justice. I just think it's a bit brass neck for Sajid Javid, who is responsible for a lot of the problems that people face in their communities of crime and antisocial behaviour, to now look to turn to the private sector and his capitalist pals about how they can cash in on the so-called cost of crime, when really what they need to be looking at is the root causes of crime, which, in my opinion, is a lot of it is down to austerity and cuts to communities.
But would, for example, you be against more prison spaces, locking more people up?
It depends what we're locking them up for. It depends. There is a lot of people who are in prison now who probably shouldn't be. You know, I know we had a lot of people who have been released under the Labour government now, But I mean, people who are in prison who've had their entire lives ruined for dealing doing some drugs,
or tweeting stuff.
Or tweeting stuff, sure.
On social media.
Yeah. Right, of course. So prison spaces, for me, it's kind of for the birds. It's up in the air. It depends why people would be sent to prison in the first place. But we do need to be looking at rehabilitating those who are in prison, but also ensuring that people who have committed crimes, I mean, are they worthy of going to prison in some cases? Are they really beyond any sort of redemption or rehabilitation in most cases?
But hold on, you don't just go to prison to be rehabilitated, do you? You go to prison for punishment as well.
Yeah, of course.
If you're a criminal, I want you to be punished, thank you very much.
Well, no, of course. And some people absolutely, it's right that they're in prison, but the point I'm making is they need to be looking at why some people are committing crimes in the first place. Obviously, for things like murder and sexual assault and all kinds of things like that, yeah, there's no justification for them being on the outside world at all. But people, like I said, who have maybe done, a little bit of, say, criminal damage as a teenager, people who have maybe been caught with a bit of weed, for me, they shouldn't be in prison.
I don't think you go to prison for being caught with a bit of weed, do you?
I mean, if you
no.
well.
Hey, ladies and gents, I can tell you, there's a case that's caught my eye today. I cannot wait to be able to discuss this one with you. I mean, talk about the declining state of the nation. I was sickened today. I was all ready to discuss it with you, but then someone got arrested. So then contempt of court kicks in. So I'll save that one for another day. I cannot wait to have that conversation with you, though, I'll tell you. Lots of you have got in touch. Paul says, I'm on a 0 hours contract and it works for me absolutely perfectly. I do not want anybody to take it away. Janice says, I was on one of those for absolutely years and I absolutely loved it and I wouldn't have changed it at all. I guess the key word, though, is choice, isn't it?
Yeah.
You all want a choice about how you work. But look, for now, that's all I've got time for. Thanks, panel. Thanks to you at home. Have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow night.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Another cold one in the south tonight, so a frost first thing tomorrow and some dense patches of fog. For many, though, it's another day of sparkling spring sunshine. The main difference to that will be across the far northwest, where these weather fronts are bringing rain currently, and they'll linger for much of tomorrow. Quite a wet evening across the northwest. That rain just trickling down towards Glasgow. We'll see some patchy rain across the north of Northern Ireland especially, but further south, most of England and Wales staying dry. A bit more cloud across northern England, North Wales, but clear skies in the south, allowing that frost. Quite a contrast with temperatures between the far northwest and the far south. A frost here and some quite dense patches of fog. Now, the fog will take a while to clear, so some of the main routes in and around the southeast, the M4, for example, so the A303 could be quite dense, that fog first thing. But generally fine and bright to start the day across much of England and Wales. Quite a cloudy start for most of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it will be a mild start, but still quite windy, gusty winds bringing further outbreaks of rain, particularly to the Highlands and the Western Isles, and they'll linger for a good part of the day. With the winds coming from the south-west, the far northeast of Scotland should have some sunshine, and elsewhere plenty of spring sunshine for England and Wales, probably brightening up a bit through the day across southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. The wet weather that will persist in the northwest, feeling quite cool here, I imagine, but temperatures widely are well above average, and in the sunshine, look at that, 14, 15, maybe even 16 degrees Celsius. Another chilly start on Thursday. Again, the possibility of a few fog patches in the south. A bit more cloud for Northern Ireland, maybe the odd shower here, but a drier day in western Scotland.